The Bureau of Land Management Satellite Network presents live from the BLM National Training Center in Phoenix, Arizona, the BLM Managers Forum. An interactive look at current public land management issues. And now, the host of your program, Larry Hamilton.
Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the BLM Managers Forum. Joining me today is Mike Dombeck, BLM Acting Director. Mike, it's nice to have you with us today.
Well, thanks, Larry. We've just been a wonderful 2 days here in Phoenix. I hope the weather is this nice when I get back home later today.
Don't count on it. I don't think that's going to happen. Also with us from headquarters is Matt Millenbach. Matt is the BLM Deputy Director. Good morning, Matt.
Good morning, Larry. We've been down here in Phoenix for the last couple of days at an executive leadership team meeting, and now we're getting ready to get wrapped up and go on back home and do our real work.
Good. Glad to have you with us today, Matt.
Thanks.
We also have with us today in the first segment is Melanie Beller. Melanie is an assistant to the Secretary of the Interior, and Melanie is also the Director of the Office of Congressional and Legislative Affairs. Welcome, Melanie.
Thank you very much, Larry. It's been a great opportunity to be here. I don't get to travel that much in my particular job. I'm usually in Washington, so it's great to be out here with the BLM.
Great. Glad to have you. Our special guest this morning is Bob Armstrong. Bob is the Assistant Secretary for Land and Minerals Management at the Department of Interior. How are you today, Bob?
Well, I'm well, and we had additionally a great time while we were here.
Good.
It was a dynamite meeting.
We're beginning today with a view from the top, and probably some of you aren't aware that Bob spends some time with the President of the United States, travels with him quite a bit, as well as plays golf with him on occasion. And Bob, you probably know what the President's real golf score is.
That's true, and I'm not telling because I want to go again. He plays a lot of golf, and I noticed that he was in Australia playing with Greg Norman. But you know, I believe we ought to start with some serious stuff. This one guy had a dog that he kept in front of the 7-Eleven, and he prided himself on it being the meanest dog that he could find. And one day a little guy came in and said, "My dog is killing your dog." And he said, "What do you mean?" And he said, "Well, he is killing him." And he said, "What kind of dog do you have?" He said, "Well, I have a Chihuahua." Well, how is he killing him? Well, he's stuck in his throat. So, anyhow, I'm going to tell you for a little while, very quickly, some of the things that we're doing and some of the things that we're going to do. I'll start with Elaine Zielinski. She has the President's Forest Plan. The real significance of this plan is that it changed the way that we dealt with the forests away from spotted owl circles into a real valid ecosystem management program. It's a watershed analysis which contains 642,000 acres. It's jobs in the woods, but mainly we are cutting trees, but we're cutting them in the right way. I'd like to move to Al Pearson. Al Pearson has the Green River Basin Advisory Committee. It's already shortened the NEPA requirements for drilling for oil and gas, and we think that it's going to be a pattern for the rest of the West to look at and shorten this period of time. We're shortening it from 26 to 16 months, and more important, we may be able to use EAs as opposed to EISs, and I think that this is going to be a significant work product that we can have. The good thing about it is you got everybody together. I didn't have anything to do with it except to get it started. But Al presided over a meeting between environmentalists and oil and gas industry, and it's working. Probably the most significant thing that we do is fire. Les Rosenkrantz is in charge of that. We had fire safety is really the first important step. Last year we burned 6 million acres without a death, and that is a real significant thing in terms of fire safety. Repair and restoration works on all kinds of ways. We need it in the health of the land, and that will be a continuing thing that we will do in the future. Designating wild and scenic rivers, weed control. These are all things that we do. Land exchanges, principally under Ann Morgan in Nevada, we took a bunch of high dollar land and traded it for 5,000 feet of Lake Tahoe. And that is real significant because Lake Tahoe is selling by the foot, and we're going to make that land available to the public. Heavy oil royalty, rate reduction. More oil with reduction will be able to be pumped. Sometimes the price of oil doesn't equal the cost of lifting. And so we're going to work in that area. RIGO 2, the Vice President's organization, is working with us hand in glove. And I don't know how many of you have seen it, but I've seen quite a few of those little hammers that we put on people's lapels. And they are significant because they mean savings. We're doing more with less. And so I think that that is another way that we can progress to doing more with less people and with government getting smaller. Martha Hahn works with the Columbia River. It's really a packfish situation, and it deals with about 7 states. It is a big program, and I think that she will do a lot for that program in the future, as she has already done in the past. Grazing, well, we finally got it right, sort of. It took us a long time, but we finally worked with the people that had the grazing on their land, and so we set up a bunch of racks. You know, the president said to me one time, I would give anything if I could pass some of this down to the people that are on the ground. And I think that's what we've done with the racks, because those are the people that are doing the grazing, and we will get the grazing to us in terms of the standards and guidelines in this month, and we'll go from there. But this is going to be, I think, a good method to handle grazing. Native American issues, we will implement 628 contracts and cooperative agreements with real collaboration. Development of dispute resolution to settle disputes is also in the making. Bill Calkins runs Almers. It's the pilot project. It's an automated land and record system. New Mexico is a real barn burner, and you will get it in your shop as we go through this year. Let's look at some of the new things that are happening. The New World Mine is going to be at the corner of Yellowstone. It's going to be a real challenge to find the acreage to buy them out, but we're going to do it. Ed Hasty has the California Headwaters Redwoods, and we've got another commitment that we're going to have to meet there, but we'll do that too. Finally, Utah's Grand Staircase and Escalante National Monument is a reality. We've got 3 years to put the monument in place, and I think that Bill Lamb is going to do it. We have 1.7 million acres of land, and I guess what I'm saying is, when all of this is there, you just can't do it alone. You've got to have collaborative management, and we are doing a good job of reaching out to people. Recreation is a new element as the land is filling up with people, and that area is good. But oil and gas, timber, grazing, they all take place in the same time in the same area. And your job is to accommodate all of these. Celebrate your accomplishments. Denise Meredith had a celebration here where we stood people out on the street and celebrated the opening of a new office. I think that's what you ought to do. You ought to take time to celebrate. So let me just say that Matt is the quarterback. He's right here. And then Mike is the coach. And you're going to have a lot of things that change. And change is the very most natural thing. There's a song I sing every once in a while, and life is mostly attitude and timing. But if you keep that in mind, you'll be on top of it. I'm going to read a quote to you. "The public lands and the resources they contain are a legacy we inherited from our forebears. Our collective challenge is to pass them on unimpaired to our children." Who said that? Mike Dombeck. Let's keep that in mind.
Okay, thanks, Bob. That's a prodigious view, and we're looking forward on accomplishing it with you. Thanks for those comments. Before we continue, I would like to mention that throughout this program, you'll be able to communicate with us via telephone and fax using the numbers provided to your offices. You can send us a fax question at any time. Use the form in the back of your satellite downlink guide, and please print your question with a dark marker. That'll be helpful for us reading it in here. You may call us whenever you like. Our operators are standing by. In most cases, however, we will only be putting calls on the air during our 2 or 3 scheduled interactive segments. We're very fortunate today to have Melanie Beller with us. Melanie also has an insider's view of the workings on Capitol Hill and the Congress. Melanie, what is your interpretation of how the latest election has impacted Congress, the committees, and what does it mean for the Bureau of Land Management?
Well, Larry, I think Congress really looks marginally different this time around in the 105th Congress. The Senate, the Republicans picked up 2 seats, so it'll be 55 Republicans to 45 Democrats. And in the House, it appears that the Democrats have picked up at least 8 to 10 seats, although a few of those are still in dispute. I think the most interesting thing to talk about is really what the committee makeup may look like. On the House Natural Resources Committee, or the House Resources Committee, it looks as if we're going to have about 8 openings, maybe 5 Republicans and maybe 3 Democrats. And so that could really change, the makeup of that committee. In the Senate Energy Committee, it appears that there'll be 1 Republican opening and 3 Democratic openings. And so that'll be a total of 4 openings, which will be very interesting to see who ends up sitting on that committee. Probably one of the most interesting changes, I think, is the fact that Senator Dale Bumpers will be the ranking minority senator on the Energy Committee in the Senate. I think we can expect a much more partisan type of interaction on that committee. As people probably well know, he's been kind of the granddaddy of the taxpayer getting a fair return on the dollar for mining royalty and grazing fee increases. So I imagine that he will probably continue to push those issues. In reality, however, I doubt that very many big changes will be coming out on either side out of those committees, because the budget's really going to be the overwhelming important issue that I think will take up most of Congress's time in the next year at least.
Okay, thank you.
Melanie, I want to thank you and your staff, and also the BLM Congressional Affairs staff, for just an incredibly busy year, 2 years that we had with the 104th Congress. And it's interesting that, typically an agency like BLM would deal with 3 to 5 pieces of legislation, and
right.
This year we had over 30, but it's fascinating that almost nothing passed.
That's exactly right, Mike. It was a very busy year, both in terms of dealing with legislation that was introduced, and also we had a lot of quote-unquote investigative issues that we had to deal with. So we were collecting a lot of paper a lot of the time for some of the committees on the Hill.
Well, Melanie, do you see the same kind of activity going on in the upcoming Congress, where we're going to have a lot of legislative action and investigative work?
It's a little hard to tell right now. I think that maybe we will see some of the traditional issues that we've seen before. Maybe somebody will introduce a divestiture bill, perhaps, another mining bill. I hope that we've laid grazing to rest, but, that could pop up possibly as well. But again, I really don't see that any of those things are going to move out with any great speed. One, just because of the makeup of Congress, and also and the strength of some moderate Republicans who are already, starting to make their strength be known within the leadership of the House. But also, again, the budget is going to be such an overwhelming issue that everyone has to deal with. I think that will take up most of the time.
I know that people are we all need to be more interested in the future than the past, but I think one important thing for all of our employees to be aware of, and that's that BLM got reauthorized.
That's right. That's right.
For the first time since 1982, and we've got a 6-year authorization, and it's ironic that this would happen in a year that we dealt with 2 divestiture bills.
That's exactly. It is kind of ironic, and I think early on we were a little afraid that BLM bill would be a Christmas tree for a lot of mischievous other bills, but it ended up going through clean, and so we're real happy about that.
This is an excellent discussion. We'd like to get some folks in the field involved in this. In a few minutes, we'll be opening the phones up to hear from you. So if you have a question or a comment for our top leadership, this would be a good time to start calling in. To avoid an echo effect when you call, please stand away from your television set or turn the volume down. Don't get frustrated if you end up on hold for a while. We will get to you as fast as we can. Matt, you mentioned something earlier that you wanted to ask Melanie about. Would this be a good time to do that?
I'm trying to think of what that was.
I think it was on how maybe some of the committee assignments might affect us in the future based on what we've experienced in the past.
Yeah, do you want to go into more detail on that, Melanie, how the committee assignments actually affect the BLM and the different kinds of things that we're trying to do?
Well, clearly it depends on who the members are and what their background is, if they've been interested in our kind of issues or not. A lot of times, or I'm hearing that on the Natural Resources Committee or the Resources Committee, I keep having to correct myself because it was Natural Resources when I was on it. The makeup of that could really. The makeup of that committee could make all the difference in the kind of legislation that we see come out of it. Again, the ratios between the Republicans and Democrats are pretty significant. Don Young usually, controls the committee on the Republican side pretty strongly. George Miller, of course, is the ranking Democratic member, and we'll just see. I know that they're right now in leadership meetings and trying to figure out, who will get on the committee.
Mm-hmm. One of the things that I think about, Melanie, with BLM and the committees, and in fact, this has maybe been more of a challenge for us in appropriations, but most of BLM is in 13 western states. And so the balance of where those members are from, if they're the new committee members will be from the east or the west, will make a significant difference in how we have to deal with them.
That's exactly right, and almost always, at least on the House side, we find that most of the Republican members are from the West, probably a little more even distribution on the Democratic side between Eastern, Midwestern, and Western states.
Do you think that the divestiture bill is put aside now that we have 6 years, and will there be much of a move on that regard?
I wouldn't be surprised if a bill got introduced. I think there may be some attempt to retool that bill in a way that maybe is more palatable to more people. I can't imagine how it will be retooled to be more palatable to this administration, however.
Right.
But we'll just have to kind of wait and see. It's still very early. Like I said, the Senate and the House are involved in their leadership meetings right now, so we'll know the makeup of the committees probably within a week.
And I suppose there's always the veto.
That's right.
They will have to operate within that framework, and so that might make a more reasonable situation in the Congress, we hope.
Right, I think so, and I think that was a message in this election, at least with the re-election of the president, that the American people are very concerned about the environment, and they don't want to be over-regulated, but they want enough to where they can, breathe clean air, drink clean water, and enjoy their public lands, which they own.
Bob, I know one question that's been asked a lot in the field, and you shared these answers with us at the executive leadership team meeting. and that is what's going to be the tenure of Secretary Babbitt and the Assistant Secretary Bob Armstrong.
Well, as far as Secretary Babbitt is concerned, I would like to let him answer that. But I think he's certainly giving every indication that he wants to keep on keeping on right now. I'm 65 years old next birthday, and the only thing is I just enjoy it so much that I really want to get a couple of things done. I said that I was going to quit in June of next year. I've kind of extended that maybe to January, but we're just going to play it like it, as they say it in the golf, we play it like it lies and see what happens. But I'm not in a big hurry, but you know, we'll just have to see.
One thing we're trying to do on this program is deal with rumor control. And Mike, we're not going to let you off the hook either. There's a lot of rumors that you might be moving on to the Forest Service. Could you share some of that with us?
Well, all I can say is Bob hasn't asked me to do that yet. But as I told all of the state directors and all of the executive leadership of BLM, as career professionals, we're subject to reassignment, and I believe that the administration and the secretaries, along with Bob Armstrong, they'll do what they think is best. I've got to say though, we've got our hands full at BLM. We've got a lot accomplished this year and the last couple of years. In fact, some of the things that Bob talked about, and I'm just raring to go to keep on forging ahead.
Okay. The field is being shy at this point, and this is not a time to be shy. We have the top leadership here with us, and this is a unique opportunity to ask some of those questions you've been dying to ask, and ask it of the folks that have the answer. So I encourage you to call in. We've got a few minutes here set aside. I don't want to waste this opportunity, so please make your phone call at this point. Melanie, you know, another concern that was raised at the executive leadership team meeting was if you had any idea on maybe what the timing would be for filling some of the key positions on the committees. Is this something that's going to happen fairly quickly, or is it going to be strung out for a while, or what's your sense of that?
I suspect it'll be done probably within the next week or two. We'll have a good idea of who all will be on. The only thing that complicates that slightly is that there's a few House seats still in dispute. But for the most part, I think we'll know basically what the committees are going to look like before, you know, maybe mid-December or so. One other issue, we talk a lot about the authorizing committees, but probably one of the most important committees that we deal with are the appropriations committees and our subcommittee on interior appropriations. There's going to be some changes on that committee as well, and it'll be very interesting to see how that works out. You have a little bit different makeup on that committee generally. The Republican side is more evenly balanced throughout the United States as well as the Democratic side, so I always keep my eye on the appropriations committee.
What's your sense of that, Matt?
Well, again, it's really hard to tell. You know, the legislative interaction between the Bureau and the Congress is a very difficult thing to predict. You know, last year and the year before, it was really tough for us to know what they were going to come up with. You remember the last Congress came in with an agenda for a lot of changes, and you know, starting out in that, we're sitting there in the BLM trying to figure out what this means for us, and it's very difficult to predict that. I think this year one of the things that is probably different than 2 years ago is that a lot of people have gotten, both in the Congress and in the administration, I think have gotten a lot better sense about what they can really accomplish. Mm-hmm. And if you think about, yeah, we're going to have some changes on the committee staffs, but you know, a lot of the members of Congress are still the same members, and I think when they sit down and really take a look at what they might be able to do versus what they thought they might be able to do 2 years ago, hopefully some move toward being able to actually get things done would be what they would shoot at. But it's really hard for us to know that. I mean, you know, they're the ones that have to sit down and decide that. And you know, once they get themselves organized and in place, I think we'll probably have a better idea of that.
Okay. Something that occurred at the executive leadership team meeting, and this is probably a good time to talk about it, was each state director had an opportunity to spend 10 minutes with the assistant secretary and the deputy assistant secretary, and we weren't sure whether we were going to the woodshed or exactly what was going to occur. But Bob, what was your sense of meeting with every state director? Did you learn anything?
Yeah, I really did. What we tried to do was to get the people in there and say, what can we do that's better? How can we help you? What does the Assistant Secretary's office, what can they do that will make things better? And we learned a lot of things. And I think that I'm going to sit down with Matt and Mike, and some of them will be easy to implement right now. Frequently, there was a disconnect in the ability of people to talk to people right quick, and we can do that easily. And we're going to work on all of this starting tomorrow, and those that we can. Some things will take a little more time, but I thought the other thing was that it always is good for you to sit down and meet with people. And they really responded to our request and opened up and told us everything that we needed to know, both the good and the bad, and I think we're going to be a better organization because of it.
Larry, I thought Bob was here and Sylvia were hearing confessions, and after I noticed that you were out of the room for so long, I thought, boy, Larry, you really gave Larry a long penance, Bob.
Well, we did, and the others would say, it's really boring in there. Keep me in here a long time. No, they were really good meetings.
Well, I think we've struck a chord here because the phone lines are starting to light up, and I'd like to go to our first caller. Bill in Montrose, are you there?
Yes.
Good morning. How are you doing?
Doing great.
Good. You got a question for us this morning?
Sure do.
All right, let's have it.
What's the likelihood of more trading post initiatives being endorsed?
It's very good. We think that just like we talk in ecosystem management, we talk about boundaryless management. What we're talking about with the trading post is a one-stop shopping for the American public. The fact is that the people really don't care if we're paid by one agency or another. What they really care about is they really care about the service that we give. And I've got to compliment all of you in Colorado and a lot of other states for really having moved forward with this. And we've got the full support of Jack Ward Thomas and relationships with the Forest Service. And what we need to do now is we need to do better with the other agencies so we can really provide one-stop shopping for people.
That was really brought out by Bob Abbey, and it's a good idea, and I think it's going to go forward.
Bill, thanks for the question.
Thank you.
Dee in Fairbanks, Alaska, you're on the air.
Hi, Larry, and the rest of you. Melanie, hello to you. I used to work for you. And
Yeah, I keep running into all my old friends from the Hill.
Is this one of your old boyfriends,
Melanie? Consider me that. But someday I'd like to get you to Alaska. But my question is really for the. I asked Matt this not long ago, but what's your take on the carryover dollars? What are you going to do with those so that we need to get to work with them? And then I wanted to talk a little bit about the National Petroleum Reserve and what you're doing. What's your thoughts there?
Well, Dee, you're getting into our second half stuff here, but let me just talk about that since you've asked the question. The first principle that we want to try to keep in mind when we're dealing with carryover dollars is that we want to try to make that money as available to the states and the field offices as we can. The thing that we're trying to deal with here is that we do have a number of unfunded national priorities, such as the Grand Staircase, Escalante National Monument. We need some funding for Almers, wild horse and burro roundups, and so forth. And so we do need to try to come up with a way to fund some of that project work that needs to be done. So we've really started out, we talked quite a bit at the ELT about what we're going to do to fund those things, and it's really kind of a three-step process. First of all, we want to go ahead and take a look at the requests that have been sent in to fund these national priority projects. Right now we've got about an estimate of $20 million that it's going to take to do that. Then once we get that pretty well figured out, the next step then would be to go ahead and take a look at some of the overhead funding. We've got a $6 million carryover in the Washington office. We've got carryover funding in some of the other national offices based in Denver and throughout the country, and those are a good source of carryover funds that we could use. And then we've also held over a 2% reserve from the pre-annual work plan, which amounted to $9 million. So if you start adding up those numbers, numbers like $6 million, $9 million, the money from the other national offices, you can see that we're starting to get pretty close to the $20 million. So we think that we should be able to get pretty close to the $20 million need by doing that. As a last resort, if we have to dip into some of the states' carryover funds, then we would have to do that in order to fund these projects. But it looks, at the time being, if we do have to dip into those, it's not going to be a very big hit. So I think most of the money that you've had, that you're counting on, that's available through the last year carryover, it looks like we're going to be in pretty good shape that you'll be able to use almost all of that.
Let me just, before you get into the National Petroleum Reserve, Matt, mention one thing to Dee and everybody else out there. The thing that I continue to push and will continue to push the state directors and all of you on is to, we're about managing the land, and the important thing we do is the work on the ground, the deliverables to the American public, and that's where I want the emphasis to go. And I understand that every level of the organization is important because our mission is to support that, but I really want to push as much of that money down on the land for project dollars as possible.
Dee, what's the temperature in Fairbanks today?
It was 18 below when I came to work this morning, Larry. Of course, you got us up a little earlier than you are, but still beautiful day.
It's tougher than Alaska.
Yeah, I guess I was thinking, Dee, if it were below zero, we'd let you ask the second part of your question, so it sounds like you qualify. You want to ask it at this point?
I have in Alaska right now, the National Petroleum Reserve is making a big play on several fronts. There's been a lot of proposals for it, and I just want to know, maybe from Bob Armstrong's standpoint, I'm sure you've had some briefing on that, and we're just concerned about that's the largest piece of real estate that BLM has in one chunk in the United States, and a very important resource, and we're concerned about that and the future management.
A good question, Dee. We'll have Bob answer it for you.
All right. I know that the following things are happening. I have the 101 book on National Petroleum Reserve. I happen to be one of the few people that have been up there and flown over it. But Brooks Holman is going to go up, I believe, next week and be briefed. And we are, and he will come back and make some recommendations. I know that when I talked to Sally, who was, Wisely was at our meeting, she said that she is going to brief Brooks on this and is going to come back down with Tom Allen and brief us. But I want the people to understand that this is a BLM piece of property. I know that the Fish and Wildlife people have got eyes on it. I know that other people have, but I really want us to see what we can do so that BLM is firmly in control, and we'll work on that as it goes. But it's going to take a while to play out.
Hey, Dee, thanks for the questions. I hope it warms up. Thanks for calling.
We appreciate this. This is a great deal to see you here in Fairbanks.
Okay, good talking to you.
Bye.
Charles in Springfield, Virginia, you're on the air. You got a question for us?
Yeah, I sure do. Hello, everyone. Starting with the summit a couple years ago, we all got off to a great start on changing some of our management paradigms. We started some teaming, collaborative leadership, and so forth. It would appear that has lost a little bit of its emphasis, and my question is whether or not those are still our prevailing paradigms in the Bureau, or are we heading in other directions?
Larry, let me answer that, at least to start with. Number one is we're forging ahead with that, and we have had lots of successes as a result of the summit. In fact, I think if there was a way that we could enumerate the successes, we would all be amazed at how much progress we've made. And one of the significant things that I've seen at headquarters, for example, is the interdisciplinary interaction that is occurring at headquarters is the thing that I continually hear from employees, in spite of the fact that other things have changed. Networks have changed, and we've got to rebuild those networks. Our relationships with constituencies is something that we have to be very vigilant of, because we've got to provide good information to the people that support us and our programs. But the fact is some things lend themselves to teamwork and others don't. And let me give you the best example of a team that I know, and that's the development of the President's Forest Plan, where in 11 months, several agencies developed the first ever ecosystem management plan on 24 million acres, and they did it in 11 months. Now, if we followed a typical approach, our planning processes and a multi-agency effort like that, we'd all be retired before that was done. So it can work, and we know how to make it work, but it's different, and we've just got to, work together, keep on talking to one another, and keep on working to get better as an agency.
Yeah, I'd like to chime in on that too. Charles, I think if you think about one of the biggest accomplishments that came out of the summit, it was the development of the Bureau vision statement and mission statement, and the 5 components of the strategic plan, the blueprint for the future. If you look around at other organizations, very few of them have that very clear way of setting priorities and setting objectives for the future. You're going to see that carried into things like the Bureau strategic plan that's going to be part of the Government Performance and Results Act. And I think we really owe it to ourselves to pick that blueprint for the future up every once in a while and take a look at it and try to assess the things that we're doing, the projects that we're working on, the programs we're trying to put forth in terms of that blueprint. It's really a very good document. It's still very timely. We're doing some work to bring it up to the present, but I think it's something that we can really hang our hats on. The last thing I want to say about that is that as we go through this strategic planning effort through the GPRA, you're all going to have a chance to take a look at the different programs that we're trying to emphasize as part of that. And anything that you can do to give us some help on that, this will be occurring over the next 6 months. Anything that you can do to give us some help on that would sure be appreciated.
Charles, thanks for the question. That was a great question.
Yeah, thank you, Larry.
Okay. Well, at this point, we'll take a 10-minute break, and when we come back, Mike will share with us his vision of the future for BLM. I'd like to thank both Bob and Melanie for being with us this morning.
Thank you.
Really
It's great being here.
Appreciate the input. Look forward to doing it again.
Okay.
We'll see you in a few minutes. Welcome back to the BLM Managers Forum. Joining us in this segment of our broadcast is Elaine Zielinski, State Director, Oregon, Washington. Glad you could be with us today, Elaine.
Great to be here in sunny Arizona, Larry. I'm a little concerned about the reports I've been getting about Oregon and Washington and the snow and the rain. So if we've got some callers that are going to call in, maybe they can give us a weather update.
Yeah, Elaine's been thinking about spending the weekend down here, so we'll have to keep an eye on her. Also, Al Pearson, who's BLM Wyoming State Director, has joined us. Hi, Al. I'm glad to see you finally gotten away from some of those wild horses.
Good morning, Larry. Yeah, it's a pleasure to be here where it's warm and at our first ELT meeting that we've had in a while. I think we've done some important business this week.
Great. Glad to have you here. Mike, I believe you have some thoughts you'd like to share with everyone at this point.
Well, thanks, Larry. Actually, I've got about two major things I want to talk about with folks, and I know some of you have heard this before, but I think it's real important. In fact, Matt's last point was an important segue to set me up for this, and that's to talk about the importance of the blueprint for the future. But before I tell you about the blueprint for the future, I want to say that it's what I told the folks at the ELT. I told them the same thing at the last ELT in February, and that's that we're in a time of change, and the only thing that's going to change is the rate of change is going to continue to increase. And it's like species. The species that stay off those lists, namely threatened and endangered, are those species that remain genetically plastic, remain flexible, remain adaptable. And that's what we've got to do as an organization. In fact, even in our personal lives, we've got to remain flexible and adaptable. And the one thing I want to say that's what Bob Armstrong mentioned is we need to thank each other for our successes, because if you look out there, the things that we have accomplished over the last couple of years, it's absolutely phenomenal. And as I look at, my hair didn't used to be gray at all, nor did Elaine's. Say nothing about Larry. And he had a lot more. But that's an important thing that we just continue to have to shore each other up, because we have some tough issues and some tough things to deal with. But first, let me tell you about the mission and the blueprint for the future. As was discussed in the first segment of the program, this was really designed by the employees and by our constituents. It's an absolutely bipartisan document that articulates what's right for the land, what's right for people, and what's right for our organization. And as Matt indicated, go back and read it. Read it once a month, because don't look for Washington. In fact, don't always look for your state offices to tell you exactly what you need to accomplish. You're the expert out there. This agency is full of people with associate degrees, bachelor's degrees, master's degrees, PhDs, and you're very, very good at what you do. And I just want to read the 5 blueprint goals as a reminder. Number 1, maintain healthy ecosystems. We're all about the health of the land. And that's the end product. That's our reason for our existence. Service to current and future publics. We talked about one-stop shopping a little bit last time. It's the people, the citizens of the United States that pay our salaries, and we need to provide good service to them. Promoting collaborative leadership. I've got to say that this agency, of all agencies, is the agency that has the most experience in dealing with advisory councils, and we turned a new corner with the Resource Advisory Councils. The fact is that BLM's been dealing with Resource Advisory Councils since before we were BLM. As a matter of fact, the grazing boards that were developed in 1936 were part of that. And we're an organization by culture that's close to people on the land, and that's working in our favor today, and keep on doing it. Improving business practices, I can't elaborate on that anymore, and of course improving human resource practices, and we're going to talk about some important issues associated with human resources later in this segment, namely diversity, and continuing to be able to relate as well as we can to the changing demographics of the United States and of the West. And there are major changes going on, and again, this is all part of adaptability and flexibility. A couple other points I want to make, and I know some of you have heard this before, but we talked about the divestiture bills, and to think that all of the argument associated with divestiture hasn't been heard. And it's up to us to tell that story. In fact, I believe that BLM is one of the least appreciated agencies in the country, because not many people know that we're the public lands are the 4th largest revenue generator for the U.S. Treasury, $1.4 billion. And we do that with an MLR appropriation of about $650 million. In addition, we send $725 million back to states and local communities in cash to pay for things like schools and roads and even county commissioner salaries, range improvement projects, forest health improvement projects, and those kinds of things. And what I'm asking each and every BLM employee to do is tell your story for the part of the program that you deal with. Because what we're about is we're about good stuff. And I've got to tell you, there's a basic marketing principle that applies to everything. Money flows towards things that people want. It doesn't matter if it's Nordstrom's, Walmart, or a government agency. And what we're about is we're about white hat business. We're about hunting and fishing and recreation opportunities for families, and families getting together and spending time together on the land and learning about conservation and watching wildlife and environmentally benign energy and minerals operations and increased weight gain in livestock, healthy riparian areas, clean water. That's what we're about. And there is an element of controversy in what we do, and there always will be. But there's a very, very important high road story that we need to tell. And if we tell it passionately, if we stay on the high ground, our budget's going to increase if we do it right. And we have an army of what, 10,000 people in this agency to tell the story. You're the friends and neighbors of people that talk to their delegations, their neighbors, and that sort of thing. And this is really positive business that we're in. And I would encourage you to tell the message, learn the story, tell the message. That's how we're going to get ahead. That's it, Larry.
Well, thanks, Mike. That was great. I think at this point, since we had some troubles in getting people on the line, that we'd like to let you know that we'll be going to the phones again in a few minutes. So if you have some questions or comments for our panel, this would be a good time to start placing your calls. Matt, I know you had some comments you want to make. You made some of those in the first segment, but if you have some other things you'd like to share with us at this point, this would be a good time.
Well, I think Dee's question about the carryover really relates to the Bureau's overall budget situation. One of the things that the ELT, one of its most important decision-making duties is to play a big role in how we distribute our funds and how we get our work done, and to try to make sure that the money goes to the most important things that we have to do. So we did spend a fair amount of time here at this meeting talking about that, and of course the use of the carryover funds was something that was of a lot of concern to the various state directors and the assistant directors. But I do want to say a couple of things about the overall budget situation in general. About a year ago, we were very concerned that we might be facing a substantial budget cut for fiscal year 1997. And that has not happened. The Bureau did get a very modest increase, about $4 million. And between the $4 million increase and the $46 million carryover that the Bureau saw last year, we're actually in reasonably good shape this year for planning for this upcoming year. So as a result of that, we're not going to see any kind of Bureau-wide rifts. We're not looking at any kind of a furlough this year. It looks like, as far as these kinds of disruptive things like we had last year, you're not going to see any of that. So I think that's very good news for the Bureau. One of the things I think that everybody needs to be careful about, though, is that fiscal year 98 is going to be a new year. And we still need to be very conservative about the kinds of things that we're doing. If you look at the projections and the plans for reaching a balanced budget, it does look at a continual downturn in our budget capabilities in the future. So we're going to be doing some things in 97, and Al Pearson's going to talk about some of the decisions that were made at the meeting. But I'd like to say to all of you that we still need to be very, very cautious about how we spend our money, and that we need to be very careful about making commitments into the future as to that future funding.
I'd like to add to Matt's comments just a little bit, because I think this is a real important topic. We went into to this past fiscal year not knowing what to expect. And one of the things that I asked all of the people at this table and all of you out there is to tighten the belt and save the money that you can. And the response was resounding, because the fact is, when we went into this past fiscal year, it could be that $10 or $20 or $30,000 you saved could be somebody's paycheck and somebody's job. And I just want to thank you for doing that. The other point that I want to make about the budget, and the fact is we did a lot better in 1997, the fiscal year 97, than we thought we would. And that's because of what you did, some of you did and a lot of you did, that I spoke about earlier. The budget staffs were very, very responsive. We provided the appropriate information that was needed to the Secretary's office, to OMB, to work with the Hill, to work with our constituencies. And I know a lot of you in the field probably wonders what goes on in Washington, but the fact is, job one of Washington is to be the ambassador for the agency, to communicate what we do. And I've got to tell you, the public lands agencies were the Secretary's top priority from the standpoint of funding, and it's because of a lot in part of what the BLM employees did for that, and thank you. And that's why I so firmly believe that if people know what we do, they'll do the budget work for us.
As Matt mentioned and Mike has alluded to here, there were decisions made at the ELT, and one part of the program is to test the state directors and see whether or not they got the decisions accurate or not. So Al, what do you think some of the decisions were that we made, and we'll see if Mike and Matt agree.
I'll try to put the Wyoming spin on it. I think we did make some important decisions, not only budget, but on those things coming from budget that relate directly to personnel and those of us who work every day in the offices. You may recall a month or so ago we got a memorandum out of the department that had determined that there would not be buyouts offered in this round of buyouts, and we reaffirmed that in the management team. Buyouts are designed to primarily to assist agencies who are facing rifts and really serious shortfalls in budget. We're not facing that, and so we're going to, we will not have buyouts. We will, however, be offering early outs, which are somewhat different. We'll be getting a memo out in the near future describing the process to consider in this. Basically, it will be you need to make a decision by March of '97, and if you choose to take an early out, would be off the rolls by the end of the fiscal year or September '97. This does a couple of things. It gives us the opportunity to further implement our field organization strategies and give those folks who may be affected by that one more option. And that's the primary reason and benefit from this. Tied somewhat to that, but separate is a lifting of the hiring freeze. We've been under a hiring freeze now for some time related to last year's buyouts and a very conservative approach to filling positions, very stringent requirements when we needed to fill a position, and for most of us that meant a hiring freeze, period. We made the decision in the meeting this week to lift that. There are still a few constraints. We'll need to check the displaced persons list of the Department of Interior to see if some of our fellow employees are displaced and would qualify for a job that we would look to fill. The other list we need to check before we'd go outside to hire is the list out of the project office in Denver, particularly on computer specialists. As you know, that is set up as a project. It is winding down, and there are people right now who are not going to have a home in the BLM in the near future. So, that doesn't just throw the door open for new hiring. I think we've all been around the block a time or two now. We know what it is to have more people than we can pay for. And I think by the numbers you'll see people being pretty darn conservative about how we fill positions and which positions we fill. But we have the ability to do that now. That's really going to help us with some of our co-op ed students and filling some key positions that we know we have real skill imbalances for or that we desperately need right now. And I think that's real good news for for all of us in the field that need to fill a few of these key positions.
How did he do? Is that Wyoming spin okay?
Pretty good.
Yeah, I thought it was just fine. You know, what we want to, if you think about a hiring freeze for a minute and then put yourself in my seat where they all have to come through me, that can keep you pretty darn busy. So what this does, I think, is put the decision-making where it really belongs at the local manager's level so that they can decide, you know, what they want to do and what the most appropriate jobs are that they need to fill. So I think that, again, I want to reiterate, though, that this is not like we're, you know, opening the floodgates and all of a sudden you're going to see 1,000 new employees coming in the Bureau. We should not and we cannot afford something like that. But I think there's a lot of jobs that, a lot of imbalance in the Bureau. You know, when I go around to the different offices and I see resource areas that don't have any range cons. And I think about the Almers project that's going to have to be put in place in the upcoming year. You know, areas like that where we've got these critical shortages and critical vacancies, those are the areas where we really need to be focusing in on and trying to figure out, you know, who we should be bringing into the Bureau and what we should be doing to make ourselves healthy. And I think we've got a good opportunity this year, and I think we should be smart about it and take advantage of that.
At this point, we're being flooded with faxes, and that's terrific. But let your fingers do the talking and dial the number. We'd love to hear from you, so don't be afraid to call. Elaine, Bob mentioned some of the national priorities. What was your impression of some of the things he was talking about? Because there was quite a bit of discussion at the ELT on some of these priorities.
Yes. Yeah, we spent quite a bit of time talking about national priorities, and I think it was really worthwhile in that it gave all of the state directors and our Washington office folks an opportunity to really get into a little bit more detail about all of the work that is being done in the Bureau, and to give us a better understanding of what the states are focusing on. Bob did a real good job of kind of going through the top national priorities, but I did want to, there's a couple I think that are maybe worth repeating, and a couple of them very near and dear to my heart. One being the continued implementation of the Northwest Forest Plan. Another one, the Columbia Basin effort, which is really a huge undertaking covering 144 million acres and 75 million acres being Forest Service and BLM land. The other projects, the big exchanges that were talked about, the New World Mine in Larry's neck of the woods there, the headwaters in California, the Grand Staircase Monument, which I think is pretty exciting for all of us in Utah. And we did talk also a lot about some of the more program-specific issues, the ones that are kind of on the front burner this year also. And again, Bob mentioned recreation and tourism as a big initiative for us. And we talked a little bit about the opportunities with the Olympics coming to Utah, Winter Olympics coming to Utah in a couple of years, and how we can kind of tap into that and really need to prepare for that right now, because people are already making their plans on added side trips, and we really want to get BLM some exposure in that huge international arena. We talked about the wildland fire policies and programs and implementation that we're doing this year, and also about the wild horse and burro program. So I thought it was a great discussion, and again, a real good opportunity to share our priorities as an organization and to support each other in our accomplishments in those priorities.
Great. Mike, I think you wanted to clarify a couple of things that Bob said earlier in his remarks.
Yes, one of the things, Larry, that, and I think you and Matt are probably more of the experts in this area, but when we talk about the demands on BLM and all agencies, when we're talking about some of these larger land exchanges like Crown Butte, for example, and like Headwaters, and there are a variety of ways well beyond trading raw land that we're looking at and arriving at some sort of accommodation or resolution in these issues, like royalty streams, like we need to take a harder look at a land and water conservation fund and see if we can convince OMB that there's a pot of money there available. And I just wanted to reaffirm that with you and Matt, that we are looking at other ways. In fact, land exchanges might be the lowest priority to achieve that. Is that right?
Yeah. I think the difficulty, Mike, with these let me give you some idea of the magnitude of these land exchanges. The largest land exchange the BLM has ever done was a few years in monetary measurements. Was a few years back an exchange in Nevada called the Galena Exchange, which was $58 million. Okay, the New World Mine Exchange, the estimate on that is $65 million, and the Headwaters Exchange is over $300 million. These are the values of the lands that the government's trying to acquire. So if you think about well, for example, the New World Mine, when the people from the White House and CEQ came over to talk to us about it, our $100 an acre rangeland that we have in Montana, you would have had to exchange the whole eastern part of Montana to pick up that one site. So what we really need to start looking at is lands and assets that have higher value per acre. And that's why we're looking at things like coal leases, existing lands that have coal leases on them that we would perhaps put into private ownership. The coal royalties revenues are another example. Just to give you an example, those sound like awful big numbers, but the royalty revenues out of the state of Wyoming are over $200 million a year. So if you think about the assets that the federal government has from the perspective of assets that are actually income producing, and this mostly has to do with minerals, you can see that that's the area that we're going to have to start looking at more so than just raw lands. Most of our land is not that valuable economically, and for us to go trading it off, just the average piece of property we have would take enormous amounts of land. So that's why we're looking at trying to come up with different ways of doing this kind of thing.
Okay. We need to get back to some questions here. We've got some excellent questions that have been faxed in. The first one is, this one is from Butte, Montana, and I'm protecting the guilty here, okay? What future organization changes may be in store for states to make them more consistent?
Larry, the things we've continued to talk about at the ELTs is the really important thing is not what the organization looks like, but how we work and what we deliver to the public. And I've got to say, especially to the folks in the field, that it's important that we get as much of the money to the field operations as possible. In fact, the ELT up in Helena a year ago now, or is it more than that, Matt? We said that the goal was to get 80% of the resources and 75% of the FTEs at the field operation level in the future. That's what, from the standpoint of organizations, I got to tell you, for a long time, my personal belief is that a 4-layer organization is a thing of the past. But what's more important is that an organization is designed that works best for that community, for that district, for that state, for that region. And I really want to focus on allocation of resources, allocation of skills, and getting the job done on the ground. That's the most important thing for us to focus on.
We have another fax here. It's from Maggie Wyatt from the Salt Lake District. Maggie's question is, Utah Judge D. Benson recently imposed an injunction prohibiting BLM from completing wilderness reinventory. Does the department plan to challenge this order?
Well, the answer is, Maggie, that the department's very concerned about that, and obviously we don't think that the judge is proper in that ruling. The Bureau's recommended to the Solicitor's Office that we go ahead and appeal that decision, and I haven't gotten the final answer yet, but I'd suggest give Jeff Jarvis in Washington a call, and he can give you the final word on that.
Here's a question that's becoming more near and dear to all of our hearts, and this one is from Darrell Barnes in the Orland District. Do you anticipate Congress making any changes to the Golden Age Passport program?
I don't know.
Darrell, I can understand you're asking that. I've not had a discussion on that. I have not heard a discussion, so I guess I just don't know.
Okay, well maybe here's something we do know. Let's try this one out. This is from the Carlsbad Resource Area. And the question is, what is the status of oil and gas inspection enforcement being transferred to the states?
Matt, you want to take that, and I'll
Yeah.
pick up the pieces?
Okay. That is still under very active discussion. We're going to be having a meeting with the IOGCC, the Interstate Oil and Gas Commission. I believe it's next month. And what we're doing is taking a look at each state on a state-by-state basis to see if we can reach some kind of agreement with the state on when to do that. The Congress has instructed us to put together a proposal on whether or not to do that over the next year. And so we're working really hard on that, but no final decisions have been made right at this moment. I think in the next month or so you'll probably be seeing us moving toward some decisions on that.
I can improve on that answer, Larry.
Okay, great. Okay, we've got, this will be the last question. This is from Ray Home. And the question is, have recently seen some of the demographic study. What are some of the implications of the study and steps? And this is the second part of the question. And what steps does the Bureau intend to take to resolve some of these problems?
Well, I think the thing to keep in mind on the demographic study, we're going to be sending those out. Larry Bembry and his staff just finished that up, and we'll be sending that out to the states here this coming week. Basically, what it shows is that most of the people that work for the BLM are between 40 and 50. So it's not like we've got an imminent problem in the Bureau with all of a sudden everybody walking out the door tomorrow. But we do need to position ourselves so that, once we do start to have a big slug of retirement starting in about 5 years, we'll be able to have the people that are coming behind that group be prepared to take over the reins of the Bureau. So it's kind of a long-term problem that we need to deal with. I think the other aspect of that, though, is that we've asked the state directors to go back and take a look at their skill mixes within their organizations so that, we can plan to bring people into the Bureau who are going to meet the needs of the future. So that skill mix study is something that's still in the works, and any of you that have any ideas about that, this would sure be a good time to give us a hand with that.
Okay. At this point, we'd like to change our focus to the topic of workforce diversity. Matt, I believe you have some thoughts that you'd like to share with us this morning.
Yeah, I do. When I came back to this job a little over a year ago, one of the issues that we needed to take a look at is the number of women and minorities within the Bureau and the opportunities for everybody to feel like they have a place in our organization. What we did is we took a look at the overall department diversity program, and what we found is that despite a lot of work that's been done to diversify not only the bureaus but the Park Service, Fish and Wildlife Service, and the other agencies within the department, we really haven't made very much progress in the last 10 years. If you look at the profile of our workforce now compared to 10 years ago, it really is pretty much about the same. So what we did is a number of us deputy directors in the department got together and put together a plan for taking a look at improving the department's overall diversity program. And it really has 4 components, and I just want to quickly run those by you. First component is that we need to do a better job of accumulating statistics and data. One of the things that we found is when we do these studies, very difficult to get after and get good information on where we really stand within our organization. So we need to work to do that, and the EEO office in the department will be coming out with a new format this coming year that they're going to be putting into place to allow us to do a better job of that. The second component has to do with recruitment. Now, because of the budget problems, this is probably the toughest part of this overall project. It's not like we're going to be bringing a lot of new people into the department, and so what we want to try to do is try to play this smart. Try to figure out, where are the areas where we have opportunities to bring new people into the organization, and the skills mix study would be a part of that. I think another example that we can take a look at is that we've just recently entered into an agreement with an organization called the International Association of Black Professional Firefighters. If you think about our firefighting workforce, it's a part of our workforce that's going to stay pretty steady throughout the upcoming years, and we do have some turnover in that organization. So it does give us an opportunity to bring people into our organization. And we think this is a real good group of people to work with. We've had numerous meetings with them, and hopefully that will be a big help in trying to broaden the applicant base of people that are interested in coming to work for us. The third component has to do with career development and training. One of the things the department had done several years ago is cut way back on its training opportunities. And so we've encouraged them to take a look at that and see what we can do to improve the training offerings and employee development offerings we've got for all of our people. One of the things that we will be setting up this year is what's called team leadership training, and that is going to be headed up by the Fish and Wildlife Service. It'll be based out of their new training center in West Virginia, and it'll be somewhat similar to the old departmental manager development program, and it'll be oriented toward people in the GS 11 through 14 grades to bring them into those supervisory and team leader kinds of jobs. The last component has to do with the measurement of performance. And if you look at your state director's annual evaluations, what they talk about is support of the EEO program, and we certainly want them to do that. But what we're going to be adding to their performance evaluations is being able to actually document some progress in these areas. You know, for example, in the black firefighters agreement, we want them to be able to show us at the end of the year what they've really done to implement this agreement. Have they actually gone out and made an honest effort to try to bring some more diversification into the organization to support the program, and things that we can really demonstrate that we're making some progress, so that we get the EEO reports and so forth back, we can really see that we're making some gains. So that's pretty much where we are on that project.
I know, Elaine, when we had this discussion at the executive leadership team meeting, you had some thoughts along those lines. Would you like to share those with us based on what we've just heard from Matt?
Well, I think that Matt is, really right on in that we have to kind of look at the big picture. And, to me, what I see happening is as our whole population gets more urban oriented, it really is difficult to get children and kids interested in natural resource professions. At least that's what we seem to be finding. So it's really important to look at different ways of, reaching out and showing folks what natural resource management is about. I think the firefighting arena, it's a huge pool of people that are, a lot of them are temporaries, but it gives them kind of that open door to this is what natural resource management is about, and you can use that as a stepping stone to get into maybe botany or range or forestry, and I think that's kind of where we really need to focus. So I think it's really a good opportunity with this MOU to have an entree into that arena.
Larry, I think one of the most important things we can do is to really be sure that everybody in this country understands that there's an opportunity for them in this organization. I know I've got a daughter who's a senior in high school, and a few years ago I took her down to the Moab district with me, and I was working, and I spent a week with her down there, and she met with a woman who was running a ranch. She spent some time with her. She went to work on a nature conservancy preserve, and the preserve manager was a woman, and she was able to spend some time with Kate Kitchell, the district manager down there, and other women who are doing very well in the natural resources field. And I think it's for a lot of people, if they can see people who are succeeding in the organization and see an opportunity for themselves, I think that'll go a long way, to broadening this applicant base and getting more people interested in our fields and in the things that we do. We have wonderful jobs. We've got a great organization that I think people would really be excited about working for if they just felt like that they could fit into it and be successful in their careers.
Okay. Some of you in Wyoming are probably going to wonder what happened to Al Pearson, because the final subject we'd like to take a look at today is the IRM modernization program. And Al is on his way back to Wyoming, and he's riding his newly adopted Mustang. So you can look forward to him arriving sometime on Sunday, probably. What I'd like to do at this point is introduce BLM's new Assistant Director for Information Resources Management, and she is also our Chief Information Officer, Gail Gordon. Welcome, Gail.
Thank you, Larry. It's great to be out west. I've been, as Larry, as we've talked about this week, I've been with BLM for all of 6 weeks now, so I'm still very much in a learning mode. Having the ELT this week was particularly helpful for me because not only did it give me a chance to meet the state directors I hadn't met before, but also to hear about some of the issues that you're addressing out in the field. So it's great to be here.
For those of you that haven't met Gail before, Gail is new to the Bureau, but not to the Department of Interior. And we thought this would be a great way to get you to meet her. And we're really delighted you joined us today. Being new to the Bureau, we've got a great question for you here, so we're looking forward to your response. And that is, what is your impression of how ALMARS and modernization is progressing in the Bureau of Land Management?
Boy, am I glad you asked that question, Larry, and I'm not really terribly surprised. Well, very early this week, our esteemed state director from California made a point of reminding me how long ALMARS had been on the table in BLM. And I think it's very easy. We have been talking about ALMARS for a long time, and I think it's very easy to forget how much progress we've already made, particularly since the contract was awarded in 1993. What I'd like to do is just to run through some of the things we've already accomplished and then some of the things that are on the short-term horizon. Since we awarded the contract to Computer Sciences Corporation, we've already installed more than 6,000 workstations across the organization. We've not only installed the workstations, but also a suite of software to go with them. We've trained more than 4,800 people of our employees, and while I've been here this week, the training center has pointed out to me that there probably are very few BLM employees who haven't been touched by training in the last couple of years. We have an email system that has connected all of the organization, and we've made real good progress recently at connecting with not only the other interior bureaus, but some of our other federal agencies, particularly the Forest Service. Data is probably in better shape now than it's ever been before. In most states, it's in really good shape. We've almost completed rehosting our legacy administrative systems. And in the last year, looking towards the deployment of the ALMARS software, we've conducted a number of assessments. We've gone to all of the state offices and we've assessed their skill and staff readiness, and also how prepared the IRM organizations are to adopt the next step in the ALMARS project. Now, the near-term future. The project has been delayed for about 6 months. This is primarily due to needing to resolve some performance issues. A decision was made a number of years ago that we would focus more on the functionality and then tune the performance towards the end of the project. When we really got in and started testing the software last summer, we realized that there were more performance problems than we had anticipated. That was the bad news. The good news is that the functionality really appears to be very good and what we're looking for. What we have done the last couple of months is to work with our contractors and the staff in Denver and try and come up with a very realistic schedule to make sure that we can deploy the software so that it will be very usable for you out in the field. Now, the schedule we've come up with right now is that in March we will have qualifications testing. What this means is that the contractors will need to demonstrate to BLM employees that the software does in fact meet the qualifications that we specified. Following that, we will have what's called a capability demonstration assessment in our pilot state, New Mexico. Bob Armstrong mentioned New Mexico. They've done a great job up to now as our pilot site, and we expect great things in the future. BLM employees will be observing that test. Following that, in July, we'll be having an independent assessment of the software. This is something that Congress dictated, but it's ended up being very beneficial for us. I think we've had a lot of very good advice and participation from our independent assessor, and that's MITRE Tech Corporation. They will do the operational testing in July, and then we'll make a decision whether to go and continue deployment across the Bureau. Right now, we're very optimistic that that decision will be go ahead. Assuming that that is the case, we will finish the hardware deployment. We will need to upgrade the hardware that's out in the field before we can deploy the software. This is something that we've known all along we would have to do, and we have the money budgeted for it. We'll continue the deployment of the hardware and the software in New Mexico, and then at this point we're hoping to deploy the software to 2 additional states this fiscal year. Those states will probably be Idaho and Arizona. Then what we're planning on doing is finishing the rest of the states by April of 1998. Let me get my fiscal years, calendar years right, 1998. So that's kind of where we are right now and where we see ourselves going in the future.
Great. This will be your last opportunity to phone in some questions. So if you're going to take advantage, this is the time to do it. There are 2 specific questions here, and I don't want to be accused, Gail, by Wayne Elvin, who's the IRM chief in the field, that we didn't address these 2 questions. So let's try them out and see whether we thought we answered them or if we need a little more information. His first question is, he's concerned that using the $5 million of the $25 million that's earmarked for hardware and software upgrades for IOC to repair the IOC code may not leave enough money for the needed upgrades in FY98.
Well, that's an astute observation. In our best judgment right now, we feel as if the $20 million that will be left will be sufficient. If it's not, we will be in the unfortunate position where we'll have to go back and ask the states for more money. However, at this time, we're fairly confident that we'll be able to handle that.
Okay. And the second part, and Wayne's looking out at the future here now, which he's renowned for. That's good. The Bureau does not seem to have a plan to address the former resources options on the modernization contract. We in the field need an increasing amount of GIS capability to deal with the increasing complexity of the resource management decisions. What is our plan to provide this increment beyond Almar's IOC2?
Well, as a matter of fact, as I've learned in the last couple of weeks, the Bureau does have a plan for what's been referred to as the resources option. Maitland Sharp and I have spent a fair amount of time in the last couple of weeks talking about this next step. What we're looking at it is really kind of more of an expansion of our existing capability rather than an option in the future. What Maitland and I have agreed to is that the first step that needs to be done is to identify what are the base resource information that we need to be able to accommodate on the platform. This is something that's his responsibility, and he is moving ahead with that. We're getting out the plans that were developed several years ago and brushing those off, and we'll be moving ahead with that. The IRM community comes in kind of the second phase. Once the resource people have identified what they want to be doing and what the information requirements are, we will then go ahead and make sure that we have the hardware and the software to accommodate that.
Wayne, I've got some advice for you. The lady's been here for 6 weeks, and I can imagine what it's going to be like after a year, so you better get ready for a wild ride. Let's go back to the phones here. Kay in Medford, are you there?
Yes.
Good morning. How are you?
I'm fine.
Let me ask you a question. Should Elaine come back to Oregon or not?
Well, I don't know. They dropped 2 semi-trucks into a sinkhole in I-5 this morning.
Oh, that doesn't sound good.
Well, we had a lot of rain.
Yeah. You've got, I think, a question on personnel. Is that correct?
Yes, I wanted to ask. We've been hearing a few rumors that there might be some lifting or easing of the 1-to-15 ratio on supervisory ratio and the 1-to-100 on personnel. And I was wondering if there was any truth to that rumor.
Well, I can start out by saying I have not heard a word. This is the first I've heard of it. And let me ask Matt. Have you heard anything, Matt?
Not definitively. No. There is quite a bit of talk about both of those issues. I know within the Bureau we're finding the 1-to-15 supervisory ratio particularly is really limiting our ability to bring people into jobs like associate district manager jobs, branch chief jobs, and that kind of thing, which are really the jobs that we've used to develop employees for moving up in the organization. So, there is some concern about that, but I think what you need to remember is that still is an administration goal, and that we're still moving toward that. So exactly how we deal with that while we're talking about it and we're concerned about it, Doesn't mean that we've actually come up with any way to, specifically any way to deal with that. The personnel officers have been meeting in Phoenix this week, and I know that's on their agenda. We haven't gotten any feedback from them on what recommendations they may have to deal with either one of those issues.
Okay. We have a question here from Dave Pomeranke from the Buffalo Resource Area. The question is, we're still doing Class 3 cultural clearances on federal land and detailed mineral reports for land exchanges of like land where the minerals is retained. Any changes coming to simplify land exchanges?
I don't know that I can answer that specifically, Dave. On the Class 3 inventories, the reason we do those is to assure ourselves that we're not giving away valuable cultural resources in these exchanges. We have tried to do some work on, doing some sample surveys on some other kinds of projects. I know we had one in Utah that dealt with fire rehab that frankly didn't work out as well as we had hoped it would. So there are some experiments that are going on to try to, lessen the load on some of those things. As far as the minerals part of it, I'm not sure. We will be coming out with a new manual here this coming year on the implementation of the Federal Land Exchange Facilitation Act. So that should help improve the way we do our exchanges, but I can't tell you for sure what the handling of the mineral reports is in that manual.
Dave also had another question, and we waited, Dave, until Al left, so we'll get an objective answer here. And that is, what will happen to the Wyoming RAC?
Well, Larry, I think what will happen to the Wyoming RAC already has. And the fact is BLM in Wyoming will move ahead and develop standards and guidelines. They will take into consideration the work that has been done by the former Wyoming RAC thus far, and we're just going to continue to move on. So Dave, I think you can just look to see continued progress in those areas and meeting the requirements of the new grazing regulations and moving forward. My prediction is it'll come back together in a couple of years, maybe sooner.
Gail, you've struck a chord here. We've got another modernization question, so we're on a roll here. The question is, with the many computer software programs and BLM to record data, will we be looking at purchasing commercially off-the-shelf software to manage our data?
Let's see. The current, we have already started using off-the-shelf software to support many of our processes in the field. The emphasis in the future will be to continue to use off-the-shelf software as much as possible. It makes sense because it gives us flexibility and it's an efficient way to use our very limited technical staff. Now, as far as software for particular applications, I can't answer that without more details, but we will, of course, continue to support our core Almer's software that's been developed, and then look for ways to expand on that using off-the-shelf software as much as possible.
Okay, that was a question from Bernie in Rock Springs. Thanks for that question, Bernie. Bob Armstrong is going to get off the hook on this one because this question is directed to Bob and Mike, so you're it. And this is a great question. For the better part of 2 years, there's been a lot of talk about some form of merger between the BLM and the Forest Service and National Park Service with Fish and Wildlife Service. Employees are also disturbed with constant internal reorganization and name changes of our field offices, which is increasingly weakening BLM's tie to the public. Are these reorganizations and name changes a preamble to a merger? What is BLM's position on a merger? What is DOI's position on a merger? And why is each state reorganizing differently?
Well, let me, I don't know if I can get through all those questions in the few minutes we have left, but let me just say this. Number one is I had a conversation with Secretary Babbitt some time ago about 3 years ago about this kind of thing, and his response was not on my watch. the thing that's important, and the dialogue about the Forest Service BLM merging and so on is, you can shuffle chairs in Washington all you want, and that doesn't necessarily mean more efficiency on the ground. And I think the important thing for us to focus on, and everybody in this room and all of you out there, is we had a question earlier about trading posts, but it's about providing better service to the public. And if there's something that's more efficiently done by another agency, then we should do that. We should work together. I mean, after all, we all work for the citizens of the United States of America, and the boundaries that exist between agencies, we sort of put there ourselves. And so I would encourage you to look at what makes sense on the ground. And the agreement that I signed with Jack Ward Thomas, for example, was to if it's from the standpoint of employee exchanges and other things, if it makes sense, do it. Just don't do anything that breaks the law. So you folks out there and the managers have the authority to do what makes the most sense on the land for the people in the organization. And I'm getting the high sign, so we'll have to answer the rest of them another way.
Great. We're nearing the end of our telecast, Mike, and I know you have some final thoughts, so if you could share those real quickly with us.
Well, thank you, Larry. There's dozens of things we could talk about, but I think there's one thing that happened this year that's symbolically very important to the continued maturation and improvement of this agency and improving the way we do business. And just like life, it's all about getting better at what you do and improving and so on. But that's the Escalante Grand Staircase National Monument. Let me just tell you a few things about this. Number one, this was ordered by the President. This was the 100th time that the Antiquities Act was used since 1906. This occurred on the 100th anniversary of the statehood in Utah. This occurred on the 50th anniversary of BLM and the 20th anniversary of FLPMA. And it almost seems symbolic that those things would happen. And what I've got to say is that the President of the United States, for the first time ever, has enough confidence in this agency to permanently assign us the task of managing a national monument. I think is a real milestone, because you know what Secretary Babbitt told me a couple of months ago? 3 years ago, the environmental community wouldn't have stood for this. And now they have the trust for us to move forward. The Secretary has the trust and the President has the trust. Thank you for doing what you do.
Thanks, Mike. That was terrific. That about wraps it up for the first BLM Managers Forum. I would like to remind our downlink sites to have all viewers sign the attendance roster and complete the evaluation form. Please fax these to the National Training Center immediately after today's show. To help your office participate in future NTC broadcasts, see the BLM Satellite Downlink Guide or visit the NTC homepage on the World Wide Web. NTC's internet address is www.ntc.blm.government. Transcripts of this telecast and other NTC broadcasts are available on the home page. I would like to thank all of our panelists today, especially Assistant Secretary Bob Armstrong for spending some time with us at the beginning of the show. And all of us here look forward to future broadcasts of this type so we can continue to share information and our perspectives on how we can work together for the long-term benefit of our public lands and the Americans we serve. Look forward to seeing you folks back in Montana. Thanks for participating.
This broadcast has been a production of the BLM National Training Center.